nickname is associated with their numbers, not yours. And especially if that nickname bothers you. Right?
Yeah.
So it works for them. It works with their numbers. They're giving you a nickname that works with their numbers, but not necessarily your numbers.
Okay.
Isn't that fascinating?
That is.
Yeah. So, and then what you also want to look at is like marriage numbers, okay, so, or marriage names. So my sister, when I thought it was really great, she was in medical school, and so she was Dr. Wagner. And then when she got married, she had a different last name. But what was cool is she kept Dr. Wagner, but then nobody could find her in the phone book because she was Mrs. something else, right? So it worked in this kind of weird way for her. And she had kind of two identities. Mm-hmm. So it actually gave her two different dream numbers, true self numbers. You see what I'm saying? It gives her two totally different identities, which worked for her. Now, for me, what was weird was when I got married, my maiden name of Wagner and my married name ended up being the same number. How weird is that? So it made no difference. And so it was funny because I went, well, no wonder I can't decide whether to take the name or not take the name, because the reality is it didn't make any difference anyway, right? So what I did was I just said, well, I will be, Suzanne Wagner in my business like my sister. But then when I come to my marriage, I'm Suzanne Wagner hyphen my husband's last name. So that makes more sense to me because they really are the same number anyway, and it doesn't change anything.
Right.
So value-wise, I don't get more energy out of one or the other, or it doesn't support me in any way one way or the other. Okay. So, but names are kind of fun and interesting, and this is also where you can get into houses and house numbers. So. Yeah, she goes, oh yeah, that. So one of the weird ones that I noticed for myself was that when people have, I notice weird things. So, and I tell people this, being a psychic, I kind of constantly noticing weird things. The houses that are always for sale in an area are always for sale. Did you ever notice that? Like the same houses come up over and over again. And oftentimes that particular house is an 8. And an 8 vibration house holds grief and loss. So what you find is that people who have those houses or pick those houses because they're in an unhappy marriage, there's going to be a death, there's going to be a divorce, there's going to be some sort of change, there's going to be a foreclosure, there's going to be a bankruptcy, like something. It's sort of weird. Wow. So those houses are constantly in flux. Now, I do believe that with feng shui and energy balancing, you can stabilize the energy of a house, but it's kind of important to know what you're getting when you walk into it. So, because an 8 is not a bad house, it means as above, so below, as below, so above. I mean, so you're going to have to really work on congruency with that house, and you're going to want to make sure there's a lot of air moving through that house and wind and clearing the energy out. So I tell people if you have an 8 house that your numbers, it's like 44 Charleston Street, okay, so a 4 and a 4 together is an 8. Then you can do the Charleston Street, you see also, which I don't know, I'm making it up that Charleston Street could be an 8, but if you have an 8 house, like the number of your house is an 8, you want to have that house feng shuied properly. You want the energy to flow correctly through the house. You might want to, if it's an older house, you might want to pull out all the old electrical in that house, because electrical wires tend to hold energy, and the old energy, it might be super helpful to pull out all the old wiring and put in new wiring, and just see what happens, because that'll change the breath of the house. It'll change the energy of the house. Isn't that fascinating?
Yeah.
So what's the number of your house?
1224. I just want to see what you come up with, because
1220.
that house, let me tell you.
Yeah. So we've got an 8 and a 9. So this is a 9 house. So now I years ago was in a house that was a 9 house, and a 9 house is a completion house. I swear that house was never complete. It was never done. There was always one more thing going on.
Yeah.
It was unbelievable. It's like you get one thing done and then there's mice, and then you get the mice done and then there's the fence broke down because of the snow, and then it was unbelievable. So, and also I found myself doing one more thing, meaning that I was dealing with so much completion karma related to my relationship, my parents, my sister, all this kind of stuff. I was doing all this karma related to the house. I needed to complete my own karma. I needed to complete learning about intimacy. I did a lot of personal growth workshops while I was in that house. So I was always working on something. And so I swore I was never going to get a 9 house again because it was so much work.
Yeah.
And I was just like, oh my gosh. And again, the house should reflect certain qualities of yourself. So, a 1 house is a new beginning house. So a 1 house is a great house if you are a young couple and you're moving brand new and you're just moving in. It's a really perfect starter home kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Now 1 and 10 look the same, and so a 10 house is a powerhouse. So if a house is a 55, that would be a pure 10 house. A house that would be a 1 would be a 10000. That would be a 1. But a 10 house, a 55, a 10 house is a powerhouse. It's usually a big house on top of the hill, lots of energy and vitality. And it's interesting to watch how even builders sometimes know that about numbers, and they'll pick numbers that kind of create a certain vibration, especially in certain areas. I mean, you'll notice that. Then a 2 house is a negative mind house again. So it can hold a lot of critical, negative, kind of things, like a little critical, negative mind. Now, again, with feng shui, you could turn that 2 into an 11. So what I would do is, again, I would look at the house, what's not working, do I need to blow out a wall, do I need to open up windows, do I need to create more space, do I need to break open these little rooms, and anything that's too like little tight and constricted, you want to blow open so that it's not so contained. Mm-hmm. A 3 house is a positive mind house. So a 3 house would be a funny, joyous, peppy, happy, great house. I mean, it's a lovely house. A 3 house is a lovely house. A 4 house would be a neutral mind house, which means it's a house that's about fairness and cooperation and communication. And so you can imagine that a 4 house is a lovely house, but a 4 house for a triple 10 might not be good. So a person who's a triple 10 is sort of like a triple dose of testosterone. It's a huge amount of energy. It's a leadership power set of numbers. So you can imagine that a power person isn't going to want fairness exactly.
Right.
Okay. So it's always interesting to look at like your address when you were a kid. So my address when I was a kid, it was a 603. So 603 is a 9. So notice one more thing to do, and notice I was in a house where I couldn't get out from underneath the one more thing. It was also a 9, and I was dealing with all my family karma. So it's like I was raised in a house that was a 9 vibration, and then I ended up in another house that was a 9 vibration, and I was dealing with all my family stuff still, because it was the vibration I learned when I was a child.
Right.
It's kind of interesting. So then a 5 house is a earthy, stable, grounded, down to earth, responsible house. It's like really earthy and really stable. I like a 5 house. It's a salt of the earth house. A lot isn't going to go wrong with that house. That house won't fall over. Let's just say it like that. A 6 house is a hermit house. So you can imagine an 11-3 obsessive compulsive, manic depressive type of person would probably, right? An 11-3 house is kind of, an 11 house is kind of a party house. And a 6 house is kind of the opposite. It's the total not party house. Like, I want to knit, I want to read a book, I want to be quiet. So again, depending on your personality, you're going to be drawn to certain houses. But you want to kind of say, well, is that a conducive energy? Is that what I'm really going for right now? Because you might be an 11 and just be so sick of partying that you totally want the quiet and the peacefulness and the solitude. That might be perfect at that point. Right. But you want to kind of know where you're at. A 7 house is a strategizing, planning house. So there's always a plan going on in a 7 house. So we've got this party to do, we've got that party to do, we're constructing this, we're doing that, we're putting things together, we're making things happen. It's a lot of attention to details. So certain houses require a lot of attention to details. And some spaces are not conducive to flow, and some spaces really are conducive to flow. Then you've got an 8 house, like I said, which is a grief and loss house, and then you've got the 9 house, which is a completion house, and you've got the 10-1 again. So So it's kind of cool. I mean, it's kind of cool to play with numbers. And then you can even do this with phone numbers. So this is how they used to do it with the phone company. I'm assuming they still do this, but you can call the phone company and you want a new phone number, say for a cell phone or something. They give you 3 choices of numbers. When they do that, I'm always like, wait just a second, and I'm adding frantically to see which set of phone numbers actually works for my energy field, okay?
Oh, okay.
So what I try and do is I try and pick homes that energetically support my mission, or energy pattern, and I pick phone numbers that support my energy pattern in some way. Like I try and do that. And what's cool is that if you don't like the 3 numbers that show up with the phone company, you just go, thanks, I'll have to think about it, hang up, and just call back right away, and you'll get another set of numbers. I mean, so you can just play with this until you get a vibration that you really, really like, that seems to align with your energy field. So I remember years ago, I had a roommate situation when I was younger, and we picked a house to be roommates in, and it was really interesting because I said to her, I said, this isn't my house, this is your house. It was really clear that it was their house. You know, my numbers didn't fit in this house at all, and sure enough, I didn't fit in this house. Like I didn't fit in this house. They loved it. It was really great for them, but it was just, it never felt like my house. And I mean, I brought all my stuff there. I was there for 1.5 years, and it just never worked for me. Vibrationally, it was not my house. It was actually their house. So the number of the building worked with their numbers, and the number of the unit worked with their numbers, and that didn't work for my numbers at all.
Right.
It was really strange.
Wow.
So now, I tell people that this is really fun and really exciting, but try not to get too crazy with it, because you can make yourself just crazy and be frantically adding numbers on every little thing. But you will find people who change their name based on the numerology and things like that. So I have worked with movie stars that, you know, had their name spelled a certain way and then changed the spelling of it slightly so it's pronounced the same. But when they changed the number vibration, it was better for them. It was more conducive to them. And little changes like that, people don't seem to notice very much. But I totally understand why people want to change their names, because numerologically you get a totally different vibration. And it's either conducive to you or not conducive to you. Now, the other thing that I like to point out is that you might also notice, because we're dealing with numbers, that rhythms of music, the type of music you're drawn to is also numeric, and it's rhythmical. So, and it can be conducive or not conducive. So I'll use myself as the example again. In my numbers, I do not have a 9 in my numbers. I've got lots of 7s, which is about strategies and structures, which is why I like the patterns of numerology and palms and everything. But when I was a ballet dancer, what is ballet dancing? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So I thought it was really an irony when I learned numerology that I have not, I mean, I didn't do 7s very much. I actually did a lot, because 7s are kind of syncopated. And I was doing a lot of 9s and 8s and waltzes and 4s. And notice I've got a lot of 4s in my numbers, and so that works. But I suddenly realized that I had all these 7s in my numbers, but I didn't have any 7 reflections musically around me. So how I discovered this was I started doing some yoga kriyas. And the yoga kriyas were in 7s, which was really interesting. So a yoga kriya, if you don't know what it is that you take a deep breath and you do a hand posture and you do an eye position and then you do a mantra out loud to a certain number of breath patterns. So a 7 would be this one. Satnam, 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 Waheguru. Satnam, 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 Waheguru. Then you do that actually 4 times and then take breath.